404 verses in Revelation. And those 404 verses contain over 800 connections, quotations, allusions, and images from the rest of the Bible. Remember I showed you that picture of all 31,000 verses of the Bible are pressing onto this book? Well, 800 specific verses are tied to this book. Revelation is the most connected book in the Bible. By the way, you heard in the previous hour the transmission of the scripture as Dr. Davis was explaining it. Did you know that when they went through the writings of the early church, they call them the post-apostolic fathers, and then they call them the ante-Nicene fathers. Those are just historical little tags they put on. And they looked at their sermons. Like right now, my teaching could also be a sermon. And if it was transcribed in the future and people looked at it, you've noticed I've quoted several verses. I quoted from Romans 5. I quoted from, I just keep quoting from these verses. All sermons have verses quoted. Someone spent their life, a man at Oxford, looking at every sermon, extant they call it, every recorded sermon that's still in a book that we can get a hold of, and he looked at what verses were quoted in all the sermons of all the pastors that wrote down their sermons that are still existing. He found out there's only one book in the whole Bible that every verse was quoted, and it isn't Romans. I'm talking about in every sermon that's recorded from every pastor of every church in the first 4 centuries of the church. Okay, the first 400 years, they're written sermons. Romans, every verse is not quoted. Doesn't mean they didn't preach on it, it's not quoted. Hebrews isn't quoted. Psalms isn't quoted, every verse. Every verse of the book of Revelation can be reproduced from the sermon. Do you know what that means? That means they spent a long time in this book, which is fascinating to me because a lot of people don't.